Hello and welcome to It's About Youth. I'm your host, Farhana Sheikh. Now, the impacts of climate change are becoming increasingly evident and rapid, from flash floods to extreme weather events. While all of these threats we are facing are growing, the segment of youths are especially concerned about all this, about what's left of the country that they are going to inherit. Now, driving them to call for immediate climate action. Now, we have with us today to discuss all this Dr. Hartini Mohd Nasir, Undersecretary of the Climate Change Division from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability, as well as Jasmin Irisha, Program Officer for Climate and Environment from UNICEF Malaysia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Let's tackle this head on with regards to how youths are feeling about the impacts of climate change. Let's start with you, Dr. Hartini. What key climate change impacts are most relevant to Malaysian youths nowadays, and what are some of the concerns they are having?
Okay. First of all, thank you to Astro AWANI for inviting the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability to promote the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum, Enhancing Resilience in Malaysia today. Climate change is significantly impact Malaysia with increasing exposure to extreme weather events such as flooding, prolonged droughts and rising temperatures. Recent flooding in Kedah and also Penang has led to substantial displacement of loss of life, highlighting the urgency of addressing this issue. As future leaders, youth will inherit today's environmental challenges. The current global temperature of 1.1% degree projected to reach 1.5 degree in the coming decades will worsen the extreme weather that we have today, will affect public health, food security and as well as economic stability. To address this challenge, this forum aims to raise awareness and educate young people on climate adaptation, supported by discussion with climate experts in areas such as community initiative for drought and flood mitigation. The government prioritizes climate action in line with international commitments like Paris Agreement, and we are now developing the Malaysia National Adaptation Plan, MyNAP, that involves vulnerable groups, including youth, to create effective climate solutions, empowering young people and ensuring the voices are represented in policy making. By participating in this forum, youth will gain valuable insight and can contribute inputs to building a resilient future, as their involvement and innovation are crucial for navigating climate change impacts.
Right, you heard it there from Dr. Hartini, some of the concerns that the youths are having, from food security to extreme weather events. Now, youths are a really special segment of the population with regards to how they are addressing climate change nowadays. With, they're more tech savvy, they're more vocal about the impacts that they're going to inherit in the future. Now, Jasmin, I want to ask you, what is the role of young people in tackling climate change?
Thanks, Farhana, for the question, and thanks for having me on behalf of UNICEF. Dr. Hartini has rightly mentioned that young people are really severely impacted by the climate crisis, not just physically and physiologically, but also they have very strong feelings about it. They are worried, they are frustrated, they are angry, and they have the rights to do so because they feel that there is an overwhelming burden that they're facing, and all these are intergenerationally linked, meaning that what they're facing today is not their problem. They didn't cause it, they're the least responsible towards the climate crisis, but they are most impacted by it. They face the brunt of it through the previous generations' impacts. And I just wanted to be clear about this, that the climate crisis is a crisis for children and young people. And globally, about 1 billion children are impacted and living in countries that are of extremely high risk of global climate change impacts. And this is according to UNICEF's groundbreaking report on Children's Climate Risk Index that was published in 2021. And climate change affects almost every single aspect and every part of a young person's life. Since they were born, children below 5 years old, they are facing about 88% of the global health burden associated with climate change. And this really increases their susceptibility and also how they face diseases throughout when they are growing up. And it also worsens malnutrition, which underlies about 50% of children mortality under 5 years old. Now, bringing it back in Malaysia, right? Malaysia has relatively high proportion of young people under the age of 18. Is about 28% of the population. And again, according to UNICEF's Children's Climate Change Risk Index, children and young people in Malaysia face about medium climate change risk, but this does not deny the fact that they are also severely impacted. And even with this risk that they are facing, Malaysia ranked about 61 globally of being exposed to extremely high shocks and burdens and stress of climate change. Young people nowadays, even though they are vocal and they're really standing up for their right, they are feeling really empowered to do so because they feel that there are not enough platforms for them to take part and also really raise their worries in terms of taking action against climate change. We have seen the growth of NGOs that are spurring in the past couple of years, and the scene has become increasingly vibrant, and we have organizations such as the Malaysian Youth Delegation, which recently hosted the local conference of youth, which is the extension of the official youth constituency under the United Frameworks Convention on Climate Change at the Menara KBS this year with the support of NRES, really bringing forward and shedding light that young people is taking action towards a better and greener Malaysia.
Right. So it seems, you know, from the plethora of NGOs that you mentioned just now, it seems that the youth are actually taking action. They are concerned about the impacts of climate change, and they are quite abruptly and with urgency taking action on this. Now, I want to talk to you, Dr. Hartini, about the unique perspective that youth can bring when it comes to climate action. What do you think those are?
Yeah, youth is the future leader. And we see that youth can bring fresh ideas, creative solutions, and challenge outdated practices that we have now. It is lead to the innovative community-led initiatives like renewable energy projects and waste reduction efforts. They also bring a strong sense of justice and equity, voting for inclusive policies that address the needs of vulnerable communities. So this perspective is aligned with our Malaysia's whole-of-nation approach that now we are promoting in our ministry. The ministry also has established the youth cluster under the sub-panel of Climate Change Consultation Panel on June 7, 2024, where we exemplify the government's commitment to incorporate youth voices through a diverse range of youth organizations, NGOs and community groups to provide insight for national climate efforts, including the NDC update for the UNFCCC. This collaborative approach is particularly significant as we prepare for upcoming updates of NDC and also that to be submitted to the UNFCCC, which is scheduled to be submitted by February 2025.
Right. With regards to how youth uses, you know, its medium and its voice, Jasmin, if you mind elaborating a bit further, I mean, UNICEF, I'm pretty sure, has a lot of programs or are collaborating with a lot of NGOs with regards to, you know, this particular issue. Do you find any interesting programs or mediums that youths are using when it comes to tackling climate change?
Just to kind of share that UNICEF has been in Malaysia for about 70 years now. In fact, we are celebrating our 70 years anniversary and about 60 years of partnership with the government, bringing together all the stakeholders within not just the ministry, but civil society, businesses, young people, and the communities at large. And UNICEF's Malaysia's work on climate and environmental program really ensures that children and young people in Malaysia can live in a safe, clean, healthy and sustainable environment, and we work on addressing the impacts of climate change, disaster risk and environmental degradation to children and young people. And how do we do that? We do that to a very multi-sectoral layer of pillars. One is for evidence generation and data collection, making sure that there is enough evidence out there that makes the interlinkages on why climate change is important to address and the specific vulnerabilities of children when it comes to facing the climate crisis. We do programs on to involve children and young people when it comes to disaster risk preparedness, and how do we take action in in the face of disasters, climate-induced disasters. We provide platform for young people through the Youth Environment Living Labs that currently works in collaboration with ALAM and the EU to create opportunities for young people. So these are just a myriad of programs that we do here in Malaysia, and we really hope through our participation and also partnership and collaboration with the ministry, we can elevate the voices of young people within these processes and really mainstream youth engagement and children engagement in climate change policies and decision making.
I mean, how people say it takes a whole village to raise a children, right? I feel like it also fitting in this context. It takes a whole village to tackle climate change with regards to partnership from UNRES and also UNICEF, right? Okay, we'll go for a quick short break after this, and we'll tackle more on the solutions as well as the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum after this break. Welcome back to It's About Youth. I'm your host, Irisha, and today we are joined by Dr. Hartini from UNRES as well as Jasmin from UNICEF to talk about youth involvement in tackling climate change. Now, we've talked a little bit about, some of the pressing issues that the youth are facing and their role in tackling climate change. Now we want to talk about the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum, or the Climate Adaptation Youth Forum, yes. that will be hosted by UNRES as well as UNICEF. Dr. Hartini, what inspired the creation of this forum and how does it aim to address climate challenges specific to Malaysian and especially those are the concerns of youth?
Okay. The forum was inspired by the pressing need to empower young Malaysians to take active role in tackling climate change. So it is organized in cooperation with my ministry and also GIZ Malaysia and UNICEF. The forum also aims to catalyze youth involvement in climate adaptation, aligning closely with the policy that we are going to develop, MyNAP, Malaysia National Adaptation Plan. So the forum is designed to equip young people with the essential knowledge and tools needed to advocate for effective adaptation strategies within their communities. MyNAP overarching goal is to strengthen governance, enhancing technical capacity and develop financial mechanisms necessary for implementing adaptation measures across various sectors, including water security, agriculture, infrastructure, forestry and public health. The forum specifically addressed climate challenges such as flood, sea level rise and drought, issues of particular concern to youth who will bear the long-term consequences of climate inaction. Furthermore, it provides a vital platform for young people to share their experiences and innovative ideas, therefore contributing meaningfully to the development of MyNAP. As signatory to the planned Paris Agreement, Malaysia is committed to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 45% by 2030 relative to 2025 levels. Right. Concurrently, the ministry is actively developing several policies related to climate mitigation and adaptation, such as the NDC roadmap, Nationally Determined Contribution Roadmap, long-term low-emission development strategies, LTLEX. The drafting of climate change bill is also ongoing, and the carbon market policy. Most recently, the National Climate Change Policy 2.0 was launched on 30th September during the Climate Change Forum just last Monday. The ministry prioritized inclusive involvement from all levels of society, ensuring that youth voices are prominently considered in national climate strategies. Through this effort, the Climate Adaptation Youth Forum seeks to create a more resilient and sustainable future for Malaysia, driven by the proactive engagement of youth.
Right. I mean, I think it's very pertinent and very timely that the ministry is taking steps to involve youth in tackling climate change because youth representation matters, because at this point in juncture, they are the ones that, like we said, they are the ones facing the most climate change impacts. So they are the ones that needs their voice to be heard the most, I feel. Even though I'm not so much of a youth anymore, but right. I'm always looking for problems to tackle. So, Jasmin, what are some of the biggest challenges you foresee in motivating youth to actively engage in climate change?
Thanks, Farhana, for the question. And just to preface that context towards a climate change narrative, right? From what we've seen from the proven science and the best unequivocal science through reports such as IPCC and also the UNEP emissions gap, is that a lot of the initiatives when it comes to tackling the problems of climate change is within the mitigation sector. And this is something that we have to acknowledge that it is super important, because even with the reaffirmed commitment by the minister stating that we have to achieve net zero target by 2050, there needs to be a forward-looking action plan and a roadmap on how to achieve so. But really within this forum that we're organizing on the 11th of October at the KL Convention Center in conjunction with IGAM, the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum, it focuses specifically on the adaptation and resilience portion of tackling the climate change issue. And it is really important to realize that children and young people nowadays are already facing and experiencing climate-related harm, and it requires urgent child-centered adaptation approaches to address these impacts. And this includes ensuring that children and young people has continuous access to essential services before, during and after climate-related shocks and disasters, which includes services in the sectors of health, education, nutrition, water, sanitation, child protection, and also adaptive social protection services. Now, a participatory approach is really important in the step towards addressing climate change adaptation, and this should and must be guided by locally led adaptation solutions. And by the forum that we're going to have on the 11th of October, it will also showcase and highlight a marketplace that will feature NGOs and community-based organizations on the ground that will be putting forward and highlighting their initiatives, and young people and participants who will be attending this conference, not just limited to the youth, but also experts, educators, civil society organizations, private sectors, and the public sector will also learn from what are the initiatives out there and how do they take part to either collaborate or participate together meaningfully. Some of the challenges, I know we always talk about problems and we have to face problems through a solution-centric mindset. Young people, again, lack a formal platform for participation, and within the surveys that we've done, even though there's two completely separate end of the spectrum. One, young people who are really out there and really very gung-ho to take action and starting their own NGOs and leading their own dialogues.
They're usually the ones here.
Yeah, and they're also the ones giving the interviews, right? But then we also have to acknowledge that there is a portion of young people who are aware of the climate crisis. In fact, they also themselves have experienced flooding, have experienced haze, has experienced the extreme heat waves that we have seen unfold in the recent times, but they don't know how to take action.
Right.
So I would highly encourage for this proportion of people, of young people, to really step out of their comfort zone, attend forums like the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum, but also learn there's a lot of opportunities in terms of digital advocacy online that they can partake in, such as, you can visit the UNICEF website, or, resources hubs such as the Youth Environment Living Labs, which host a lot of information on other NGOs and how they can take part in terms of taking climate action within their own individual capacity and needs.
So is it the lack of, so we have platforms, like you said, digital and also on ground. So is it more the lack of motivation or the lack of information on these platforms? Is it like that?
Yeah. I think there's multiple challenges when it comes to accessing the platforms itself, accessibility and language barrier. If you notice, a lot of our platforms online, the medium of communications is in English. But when we look, in a wide perspective and approach, is that a lot of marginalized communities who are impacted by this climate crisis are mostly those who are not from English-speaking communities, and they communicate within their own local language. And the question is, do we have enough resources that is readily available in their local languages? I think the answer is no, we don't have enough, and we have to create an enabling space for the language barrier to be bridged in terms of their gap and also accessibility needs. And it's not just language, right? It's about, are we also reaching adequately towards children and people with disabilities? Sometimes the information that is out there is also not accessible towards these marginalized communities, and how do we make that information easily digestible, but also something that they can absorb in more layman terms. I think the issue is that climate change is super highly jargonized. Yes, a lot of abbreviations,
can be very
a lot
overwhelming
of
when people say net zero carbon emission. You know, what's the difference? Stuff like that. You know. So
exactly.
I understand where you're coming from, because, you know, getting into climate change topics, especially at a young age, you know, we don't really learn all this in textbooks, right? And it's something that we are experiencing sort of on the go with flash floods and all that. So it requires a more adaptive, more localized, more comprehensive approach when it comes to you know, getting youth involved, right, Dr. Hartini? So back to the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum. Why is it important, you think, to have this forum, and what would the impact you hope it would bring in longer term, beyond the forum?
Okay, this forum is essential key to provide young people the platform that what Ms. Jasmin mentioned just, to engage in meaningful discussion actually, and also where youth can voice their concerns and also discuss about the climate change issues, voice their concerns and contribute innovative ideas. This engagement can foster sense of belonging, sense of ownership and responsibility among the youth, and helping them to understand more the critical issues in climate change and how to tackle climate change in the future. As future leaders in Malaysia, the active involvement of youth is crucial, like I mentioned before, in ensuring that climate change actions are effective and also relevant to all levels of society. And this forum also aligned with the commitment to climate resilience as demonstrated during the UNFCCC COP in Dubai last year, by ensuring the inclusion of vulnerable groups, particularly young people, in decision-making process. This inclusive approach is reflected also in the intergenerational dialogue at Malaysian Pavilion in COP28, where young leaders such as representatives from UNICEF, UNDP, MYD, YEL and Alam, and other youth climate activists collaboratively discuss climate resilience alongside government representatives and business leaders from Malaysia and beyond. This dialogue also focuses on multi-level cooperation for sustainable outcomes. Beyond the forum, we hope that it will inspire and also empower youth to take climate action in their communities, advocate for sustainable practices, and contribute to raising awareness about climate adaptation. The goal is for participants to be equipped with the necessary knowledge and skill to become climate champion. And also, the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum is more than a single event. It is a stepping stone towards building an informed, engaged and proactive youth population that is ready to contribute meaningfully to the country climate goals with a lasting impact that extends far beyond the forum itself.
Right. I mean, I like how you mentioned that, you know, youths coming in here looking for a sense of belonging and a sense of responsibility, because, you know, it's forums like this that would gather, you know, climate activists, experts, stakeholders, businesses, and everyone in the climate action community together. And when youth are involved in all this, they feel inspired, they feel that they belong, they feel that, you know, they feel empowered to take stronger action and bigger voice when it comes to tackling climate change. So I applaud UNICEF and RAS for hosting this forum and making sure that youth voices are heard on this front. So, right, we are nearing the end of our show, unfortunately. So, last but not least, what message, in brief, what message would you like to share with youth on tackling climate change, and advice you would give to young people who want to get involved in climate action, and probably a little PSA on the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum? Jasmin, you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Farhana. I think when it comes to engaging on young people, UNICEF really recognizes that young people themselves are experts, and this is also evident through the several programs that we've done through the Youth Climate Champions that we've onboarded as part of UNICEF to really help us advocate and really realize our goals and commitments towards tackling the climate crisis through a child-sensitive and youth-inclusive lens. For me, just three quick parting key actions that young people can take in terms of moving forward. make your voices heard. One, you can do that through attending the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum, a shameless plug, but I assure you that there's going to be relevant stakeholders that are involved. It's really good towards really building the network and connection, but also really learning from the experts, right? Secondly is to find your community. I think taking climate action for someone who is really passionate about climate change and solving the issue is that sometimes it can get very lonely, it can get very frustrating, and sometimes people fall into this term called climate anxiety because they just feel an overwhelming burden to tackling the issue. Find your community, and you can find them online, you can find them by attending these events, you can go through social media such as MYD, Kami, Yale, and find resources there and connect with people. Thirdly is, my advice is do what you can within your own capacity, and it's whether writing to your local councils to highlight certain issues that you're facing within your vicinity, and vote. It is really important, and your voices matter. To keep up with ongoing projects and initiatives, feel free to follow UNICEF online, and I really hope to see you at the Youth Climate Adaptation Forum.
Dr. Hartini, last parting words in brief.
I think Jasmin has mentioned most of them, but from the government perspective, youth are key to ensuring that our policies are in line with what they need, and also their insights, creativity, and passion are essential in driving meaningful changes. And also, I can say that climate change starts from us. It is an individual choices, and simple actions such as reducing waste and conserving energy can collectively make significant impact. So stay informed, stay engaged, and voice your ideas. Your commitment today will help building the resilient future for Malaysia.
Right. That's a very nice parting words from Dr. Hartini as well as Jasmin on tackling climate change and youth involvement, key involvement in this. Youth Climate Adaptation Forum is happening on the 11th of October at KLCC Convention Centre. Look forward to that. More information, I think you can go to UNICEF as well as an UNRES website to look into it. So this is the place that you can have multiple discussions on tackling climate change and see where you can fit in and see where you can make your voices heard. Thank you so much, Dr. Hartini as well as Jasmin, for your time. I'm Fana Sheh. Thank you for watching.